Have you ever really, truly stopped to think about the buildings you walk in and out of every single day? We usually judge them on how they look, right? But what if there's a much deeper story going on? What if every single wall, every window, every single doorway is actually a moral decision? Let's dive into that idea and just see where it takes us. We have this image of architects as artists, right? Creators of these beautiful sculptural objects. But because their creations literally shape how we live, how we work, and how we interact with each other, we've got to ask a deeper question. Is their main job to make something beautiful, or is it to make something ethical? Or hey, maybe that's the wrong question to be asking in the first place. What if the most powerful, most incredible architecture isn't about choosing between beauty and morality, but finding a way to fuse them together? So this tension, this tug of war between how a building looks and what a building does, well, it's been a huge debate in architecture for a very long time. It's this kind of hidden conflict that plays out just underneath the surface of every design. And look, we're all guilty of it. We walk by some new building and our first thought is either, wow, that's gorgeous, or yikes, what an eyesore. That's the aesthetic judgment, plain and simple. But here's the thing. Architecture is totally unique among the arts because we don't just look at it, we live inside it. It literally frames our lives, it influences how we act, and it can even shape what we value. And that is the ethical side of the coin. And believe it or not, this is not some new radical idea. Way back in 2000, one of the most prestigious architecture events on the planet put this challenge right up in lights. It was basically a massive call to the entire profession to rethink its priorities, to look past just pure beautiful form and really face the huge social responsibilities that come with, building our world. So why is this ethical weight so unique to architects? I mean, what's the big deal? To get that, we need to understand what makes their ethical problems so fundamentally different from what you see in a lot of other fields, like, say, science. Okay, now check this out, because this distinction is really the key. Think about a biologist who makes some mind-blowing discovery in cloning. The ethical questions that come out of that, like should we clone humans, are massive, right? But they're external to the science itself. A biologist can be an absolute genius at science without having a clue how to solve those ethical problems. That's for philosophers and lawmakers and all of us to debate. But for architects, the ethical problems are internal. And this is where the rubber really meets the road. A scientist's professional reputation isn't destroyed if they can't solve the ethical mess their work creates. But an architect who designs, say, a housing project that makes people feel isolated and actually increases crime, they haven't just made a moral oopsie. They have failed at the absolute core of their profession. Their credibility as an architect is shot. So the crucial point, the real takeaway here, is this. For an architect, solving these very human, very ethical problems isn't some extra credit assignment. It is the job. You literally cannot separate the ethical performance of a building from its architectural quality. They're the exact same thing. Okay, so that's the theory. That all sounds good, right? But what does this actually look like out in the real world, especially in places where money is tight and the human needs are just enormous? Let's take a look at a few architects who really put these ethics into practice. Now this is a radical shift in thinking. It throws out the old idea of the architect as this lone genius who swoops in and imposes a vision for a community. Instead, this approach sees the architect as more of a facilitator, someone who works with people to create solutions together. It's all about empowering the residents, not just sticking them in a box. Let's start with the absolutely incredible work of Balkrishna Doshi in India. So he was faced with this huge challenge of creating low-income housing. But he didn't just design a boring block of apartments. No, he had this much deeper idea that a home isn't a finished product that you're just handed. It's a living process that you get to be a part of. So instead of just bulldozing the so-called slums, Doshi actually went and studied them. He saw their strengths, the incredible community life, the mix of homes and little shops, the amazing flexibility. So his solution wasn't to give people a finished house. He gave them a starter kit, a solid, basic unit, and then he empowered them to build onto it, to change it and grow it as their families and their finances changed over time. And what came out of this wasn't ugly or chaotic at all. It was something you could call an aesthetics of necessity. The beauty wasn't just slapped on from the outside. It grew organically from the needs, the culture, and the hands-on participation of the people themselves. It's a kind of beauty that's rooted in dignity and in real life.
A pretty similar philosophy takes us all the way to Chile with Alejandro Aravena and his firm Elemental. His guiding principle sounds simple, but it's so powerful. Do more from the same. Basically, how do you squeeze the absolute most value out of a situation when the budget is impossibly small? The problem he faced was a classic one. The government subsidy was only enough to build a teeny-tiny substandard house. The normal solution would have been to build 100 really bad houses. But Aravena's genius was to just reframe the whole problem. He said, what if, instead, we build half of a really good house? So they built the essentials, the most difficult parts, the frame, the roof, the kitchen, the bathroom. And they left the other half as an open structure for families to fill in themselves whenever they could afford to.
What this creates is what you might call an aesthetics of participation. It's this beautiful, amazing hybrid. You've got the strong, well-designed professional framework, but it's finished by the spontaneous, individual, and always changing homes built by the very people who live there. The building becomes this living, breathing collaboration. Okay, our last example takes us to Hale County, Alabama, with Samuel Mockbee and his famous rural studio. And this one is as much about education as it is about building. His whole mission was driven by this idea of sustainability that wasn't about high-tech gadgets, but was born out of deep, real-world necessity. At the rural studio, architecture students don't just sit in a lecture hall. They actually go live in the community they're serving. They work side by side with the residents, designing and building homes and community centers together. It's this incredibly immersive lesson that teaches them the most important thing of all, that when you get out into the real world, you simply cannot pull apart your ethical responsibility from your aesthetic choices. They're completely intertwined.
So how do architects like Doshi, Aravena, and Mockbee even do this stuff? What's the secret tool that lets them make these incredibly complex judgments? Well, it's a cognitive skill that the philosopher John Dewey called moral imagination.
And it really just breaks down into two simple parts. The first part is empathy, and I don't mean sympathy, feeling for someone. I mean truly trying to imagine yourself as them, to see and feel the world from their point of view. The second part is what Dewey called dramatic rehearsal. This is the creative part, where you play out all the different scenarios in your mind, imagining all the possible ripple effects and consequences of every single design choice you could possibly make.
So after going through all of this, there's just no way we can look at buildings the same way again, right? This isn't just some abstract theory for architects, it's a whole new lens for every single one of us. The huge takeaway here is this. A building is never just a building. It is the physical result of hundreds of choices. Choices about community, about privacy, about dignity, about how we live. It's a landscape of moral decisions that has a direct, real, and lasting impact on every person who ever steps inside it. So I'm going to leave you with a little challenge. The next time you walk into your office, your school, a hospital, or even your own home, just stop for a second. Look around. And instead of just asking yourself if it's beautiful, ask a totally different question. What moral choices were made here for me, and how are they shaping my life in this very moment?